deep in the heart of Texas.
We're in the business of winning.
Don't bet against me.
I don't bet anyway.
Lose your life.
Yeah, Casual Hoops head, Herm. Do you guys want to hang out to help judge this debate, or?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm here.
I'm down. Yeah, me and Herm. Casual.
Alrighty, I will not judge the debate, and I will just I'll just moderate, I guess. I'll push the mute button if it goes too far. But yeah, so who wants to go first? Nick?
I usually go first if the other person doesn't oblige or object.
Ro, do you want to go first, or do you want to go second?
All right, I'll set it go.
What's that?
All right. No, I said I'll set it off. It's cool.
No, do you want to go first? Nick
he wants to go first. Yeah.
I said I'll go first. I said go.
Okay, your audio is not great, bro.
How does it sound now?
Better. Okay,
better?
T Perfect. Yep.
All right. Yeah, I'm about to
it's
have
more better. T Perfect, can you just for the people watching now, can you give what this debate is about? Can you explain what it is?
Yes, guys. So for everyone watching and for Casual and Herm, and myself, this is one of our continuing series about which team that didn't win the championship in any given specific year is greater than whatever they pick. So NB Sports, Nick has picked the 2016 Spurs, didn't win famously that year. Same thing with Ro, we picked the 02 Kings, controversial year that year. So they're going to be hearing which of these two teams is greater, heads up. And again, none of these teams, obviously, that's which one did win a title, so they're going to go at it.
Alrighty. All right, so Ro, Nick, y'all know how this works. There's going to be a 10-second primer for you, Ro. Once that 10-second timer goes down, you'll hear a bell, and that is when the round starts. The end of the round is when a bell rings, and that's the beginning for the next. It's a continuous format. The bell is the transition point. So, are you ready, Ro?
Yes, I am.
All right. If you are not, as a courtesy, if you are not talking in your round, please mute yourself up. All right. Ro, I'm going to start the timer now.
Okay, so the purpose of this debate, the format of this debate is you got two great teams who didn't win the championship. I'm taking the 2002 Sacramento Kings. You talk about one of the most controversially robbed teams in history, a team that pretty much had the team going for the three-peat, the Lakers, beaten. And it just kept a couple of controversial no calls, a shot they counted. It was well after the 3-point. You actually had a rule change based on that. Now that we have the red light, signifying the end of a quarter or the end of a shot clock, it helps the referees judge an actual whether a shot was taken. Now we actually have replays off of that. So the Robert Horry shot I'm talking about. Well, so let's prep this team. This team was a very deep team. This team had everybody in their prime. Chris Webber at his best. Peja Stojakovic at his best. Mike Bibby at his near best. Doug Christie, an All-NBA second-team defensive player. You had two guys off the bench in Hedo Turkoglu and Bobby Jackson. Both were up for Sixth Man of the Year. You had three guys with MVP votes in Peja, Chris Webber, and Mike Bibby. Coached by coached by Rick Adelman, a guy who took Portland to two finals with Clyde Drexler and the crew. This team had everything. They just played in the wrong city. Let's keep it real. I don't like getting into the what ifs and controversies, but I watched that team pretty much have the Lakers beat. I watched that team. Mike Bibby taking elbow in overtime from Kobe Bryant and get no call. Meanwhile, Kobe Bryant got called for being breathed on. Listen, this team gave the Lakers everything they wanted. They were great. They were great, deep team. Scott Pollard rounded out the Scott Pollard and Chucky Brown, veteran, rounded out the rotation for this team. In the playoffs, Peja Stojakovic took an injury in that series, and they still took the Lakers to 7 because Hedo Turkoglu stepped in and played small forward. This team was deep, great start, one of the best starting fives I've ever seen. I didn't mention the veteran center Vlade Divac. He didn't have any accolades. Only he was a adequate center that could have guarded anybody in almost any era. Veteran, played with the Lakers, Showtime, played with right from Magic Johnson until this Chris Webber late team. Chris Webber, I think, was the most dynamic player on the floor, being a 24, 10, and 5 or 6 assist type of captain. This was the best of Chris Webber before his knees went out. This is a great team.
So I did kind of expect the reason that this team was picked was kind of for an emotional and sympathy play on how they got robbed, and I'll come back to that. But I do want to say that a team being robbed in a vacuum really holds no weight in this debate or topic. It's really not what we're discussing here, and I'll get into that in the next round. But I want to start by giving my personal criteria about what I think makes a great team that didn't win the championship of a particular year. I think the majority of this argument, call it 51% or more, will come from the regular season performance and dominance. Because obviously no one won a ring, everyone lost in the playoffs, so that will be the biggest body of work that we have. It's the biggest sample size we have for each respective team, and if we are not going to look at that, that means, again, we'd be heavily focusing on playoff performance in which everyone came up short. Second, I think that the second most important thing to look at is the core group of players on the safe team within a relatively same time and what they achieved together outside of that given year, a sort of pedigree or a track record, if you will. Some consideration can be given to what players did individually away from the teams we are discussing, but largely it's what did this core group of players do together. With these two main criteria, if we are largely to agree to that, I do believe the 2016 Spurs easily clear the 2002 Kings. They had a much more dominating regular season, and their core group of players were part of a dynasty, and they were proven champions. Again, the Kings never got out of the second round, minus this year that they went to the conference finals with the Lakers. They constantly came up short with that core group of players. And then if we also take it what the core group of players were, and you add in Kawhi Leonard, who was a defensive player of the year that year, he got second in MVP behind Steph Curry's unanimous MVP that he won. Just the players alone, their pedigree, the coaching, Popovich versus Adelman is not even close. This team easily clears the 0-2 Kings. And again, I just want to reiterate that because a team got robbed, it doesn't really mean anything in this debate. If that was what we were going to do, then we would pick the 06 Mavericks, which is very close to me, right? And so I just want to say that people need to remove the emotion of thinking that the 0-2 Kings got robbed from this debate. In reality, this team never got out of the second round for their entire existence for this core group of players. And if we want to go all-star for all-star, all defensive selections, all NBA selections, this team easily clears the 0-2 Kings, which I'll get into the personal and seasonal accolades and how they dominated compared to the 0-2 Kings in the next two rounds. But I want people to remove the emotion that people have that they got robbed, right? We could do that for many teams. I don't think it really matters.
So, yeah, so I mentioned the rob, but just to set up the debate, just to set up the greatness of this team. Now, my opponent said they didn't get out of the second round. No, that this particular team got eliminated in the conference finals in 7 games. As I said, I think the NBA office, David Stern and them shit the bed of a prospect of a Sacramento versus the Nets finals, which would have been probably one of the lowest rated finals of all time, two of the smallest markets. you had at the time. But that's not. I mean, I just mentioned that because again, I wanted to pretty much illustrate how great this team was. This team did face the three-peat Lakers in every season of their three-peat, and of course they came up short. They came up short in 2000. They came up short in 2001. So this was a team that was knocking on the door of a dominant team, the Shaq and Kobe Lakers. My opponent mentioned not getting out of the second round. Well, that's what happened to this 67 win San Antonio team. They lost to OKC in 6 games in the second round. My opponent did mention Kawhi, who was at his almost entering his peak. You know, he was second, he was the DPOY, and he was the runner-up to MVP to the unanimous Stephen Curry. That means he didn't get a single MVP vote, first place MVP vote. Well, again, Chris Webber was in his prime, and I believe Chris Webber in that particular season. See, that's my opponent has laid out how these guys were great in other seasons, right? This was the last of Tim Duncan. That was the last of Tim Duncan. Tony Parker averaged 11 points a game. That was pretty much the last of him in his prime as well. They did have LaMarcus Aldridge, a guy who failed in Portland many, many times, right? They did have, who else was on that team? Patty Mills. I mean, like, I will say this was not the best. This was a regular season team. A 67-win team that didn't get to the conference finals is viewed as a failure. My Kings won 61 games. Again, they were knocking on the door. Unfortunately, we don't in the seasons after this, injuries started sapping Peja Stojakovic. Injuries started sapping Chris Webber. And even Mike Bibby got a few injuries, so we never got to see this team at its peak. This was a peak Sacramento Kings team. This was a championship caliber team. They proved it. They damn near took down a three-peat. They damn near took down a team that was on their way to a three-peat. And I know the would have, could have, should have. I hate those. But when you saw the egregious calls, when you see one of the referees pretty much saying that this was a fixed series, you got to give it some credence. Again, I'm just going off the fact that this was a great championship level team.
All right, I'm gonna get into the player by player comparison because he has said that this team was like peak, or that the players were really good and really deep. So also I want to say, I'm not trying to hate on the Kings. Again, I know what it's like to feel like you got cheated with the 06 Mavericks. I know that feeling very well. I also enjoyed watching this Kings team and my Mavericks team battle it out in what they deem sort of like the first to 100 era of basketball, whenever the pace started to pick up a little bit. So I do feel for the Kings, but I just think that trying to use, well, they got cheated and kind of what if, I think that per se does not really go into the argument of how good a team was. So in comparison, the 2016 Spurs were more proven with their core group of players, as well as having a better or more legendary head coach in Craig Popovich, who out-angles Rick Adelman in almost any scenario. The 0-2 Kings team, although that particular year they did have 2 All-Stars, which the Spurs also had 2 All-Stars, only had 1 Naismith Hall of Fame inductee, just going off their NBA career in Chris Webber. On the other hand, San Antonio had 4 Hall of Famers, possibly 5 if we're going to count LaMarcus Aldridge. It's a little bit of a toss-up if LaMarcus Aldridge gets in. I kind of think he'll ultimately get in, but he's definitely a Hall of Fame worthy player. He's definitely on the cusp of being in the Hall of Fame. This doesn't include other bona fide players like David West, Boris Diaw, who received some 6th Man of the Year votes, Danny Green, and Andre Miller. The 0-2 Kings had 1 player make an All-NBA second team, compared to San Antonio having a player on the All-NBA first team and All-NBA third team. So again, they beat them there 2-1. The Kings had 1 player make an All-NBA defensive team, while obviously we know Kawhi Leonard made the All-NBA defensive first team, and he won a Defensive Player of the Year award that year. That's the highest achievement that any player won out of both sides. The Kings did have 2 players receive 6th Man of the Year votes, compared to only 1 in Boris Diaw for the Spurs. But again, I'm not sure if 6th Man of the Year votes is really going to be a crux of an argument of how great a team was. The Kings also had 3 players receive MVP votes, albeit quite down the list at 7th place, and 2 tied for 16th place, which is essentially irrelevant. while Kawhi finished second in MVP voting. Again, he only finished second behind Steph Curry's absolutely legendary MVP season where he was the first unanimous MVP ever. With all that being said, the pedigree of the players in the 2016 Spurs, as I kind of mentioned in the first round, is one that even most championship teams themselves never reach when it comes to being compared. And when it comes to being compared to the 02 Kings, player for player, it's not even close. You're muted.
Ro, you're muted if you don't know.
Sorry about that. Okay, now I'm sorry. I landed here. The only reason I brought up the robbery is because I'm just really trying to illustrate how good this team was. Again, this was the peak team. This was the peak team. The Spurs were a regular season team. 67 wins. Really the only player you could say was really at their peak was Kawhi. Everybody else, David West, all these guys were past their prime or matter of fact, everybody was past their prime. Boris Diaw has seen better days. Pretty much everybody you can name on that roster, if you go up and down, they were past their prime. My opponent has not really named, other than the MVP voting, he's really not named what they did that particular year. That leader scorer averaged 21 points a game. I could get 20 points a game out of about 4 guys on the Kings, and I could get 20 points out of Bobby Jackson off the bench. Were they a better defensive team? Well, I don't know. You got a lot of players in their 30s past their prime. What they accomplished, 67 wins, that's very impressive. But again, they got knocked out in the second round. The Kings were again a final. I think they were the second best team in the league that year, possibly the best, because they beat the team that won the championship. I believe they should have beaten the team that won the championship. Just with some controversial calls. Again, I don't want to live off that. I will say this: Chris Webber got 5 first place votes for MVP that year in a season where Shaq, Kobe, Tim Duncan in the league. That was an impressive. That's the best of Chris Webber. They got the best out of Chris Webber. They got the best out of Mike Bibby. They got the best out of Doug Christie. They got the best out of Pager. This is the best. I've seen the Spurs play better in other years, and that's what my opponent has lived on. That they were better in other years, but as a collective, well, this was a bunch of reclamation projects coached by a great coach, by the way, and Greg Popovich. But this might be just why they were only a second win team that could win 67 games in a regular season. Other than that, hey, listen, 2 great teams. I just think the Spurs, I think the Spurs were just not as great. They were not at their peak. And I got the peak out of this Sacramento Kings group. Now, unfortunately, yeah, they didn't go further. They didn't go further. But San Antonio's days, their best days were behind them, except for Kawhi. Everybody else, their best days. This were their best days in 2002.
Yeah. So I think bringing up the fact where someone might have gone out in the playoffs is kind of irrelevant, because if that was the case, then we would just all pick teams that reached the finals and lost. So he kind of keeps bringing up, like, what did this team actually do? What were they about? So first of all, everyone was still extremely efficient. Again, Duncan and these guys were on a bit of a minutes restriction, being a little older. But let's look at what the team actually achieved, right? Again, this is where I think the majority of the argument kind of does come from. It's their biggest sample size, their biggest body of work. The Spurs won a staggering 67 games compared to the Kings' 61. Only 7 teams in the history of the NBA have ever won more games. In 2015, 2016, they were hands down the best defensive team in the league, being first in defensive rating and first in opponents' points per game. They were also 10th in points per game scored to go along with that great defense. They only averaged, get this, the Kings' pedigree is supposed to be their offense, right? The Spurs only averaged 1 less point per game than the 02 Kings. I mean, really think about that, right? If their pedigree is supposed to be offense, and I'm only trailing them by 1 point per game while also having the best defense in the league by a good margin, that's quite impressive. The Spurs were also 4th in offensive rating that year, actually having a 1 point higher offensive rating than the Kings in 02. meaning they were slightly more efficient or effective per possession. They were first in net rating, which was good for about a 3-point higher differential compared to the Kings, who I think were also first in net rating that year. But the Spurs had an even better net rating than what the Kings had. They were second in SRS, which is where you adjust it for your average competition, which was about 3 points higher than what the Kings had for their SRS in 02 as well, meaning they're beating their average competition by a larger margin. Statistically speaking, the Spurs were head and shoulders above the Kings in almost every aspect. There really isn't one thing that the Kings as a team were better than the Spurs at. From regular season performance, the pedigree of what the players had, the coaching, accolades, everything, once you kind of add it up, the Spurs come out on top on almost everything. And again, if we remove the sort of sympathy for the Kings and the fact that they got cheated, there's really not much else to sort of left on the bone here for the Kings to go at. Would the Kings have gone on and beaten the Nets? Probably. But again, that's a big what if. And as much as people want to say they were cheated out of a finals bid, the Spurs team is not only better than that Kings team, they are arguably the best team to never win a ring when you actually look at their regular season performance and the pedigree and past performance of their players and coach as well. And that's where I'll end it.
All right. That was a great debate. We'll go through the judges first, and we'll hear from the participants about how they thought they did in the debate. So first, T Perfect, how do you see this?
I think this was a fantastic debate. I always like learning from, especially in this series, about stuff that I didn't know about these teams, right? And I felt that I did that today. I gave it 2-1 to Rowe, but here's how I broke it down. The round one, they came out, and I love Rowe just kind of came out and didn't really lay a whole lot of groundwork. He just kind of went into his argument, which was, on the controversy of that series, there were a lot of stuff that was changed or whatnot, or influence changes, like replays, things like that. He really mentioned that they had that team was stacked with prime talent, like the best version of, I love how he said the best version of guys like Weber, Jason Williams. They had a fantastic underrated bench. A lot of guys have MVP votes. Obviously, he did mention how Adelman had previously taken another team to the finals, which was great. Obviously, he didn't claim for he's the best coach, but I love when he really brought that up. And then he also said that, maybe they just ended up playing in the wrong city, which I think is a good point. But then he also built on that and said that they took the Lakers to 7, which I think is a fantastic point because that Lakers team was looking to three-peat. They heavily favored, things like that. He, again, broke down their starting 5. He gave a lot of players their flowers. And then he kind of reiterated that. And I was looking for Nick to kind of do the same thing, but Nick came out and, made some valid points. It doesn't matter if the team was robbed, which is a huge point, and it doesn't really matter. That's not what we're arguing here. He did point out that the Spurs had a better regular season, but then he kind of coasted and just said, they have Kawhi Leonard. He said Pop was a better coach and kind of stayed on that for a while. I was kind of looking for him to kind of do a little bit more of a deep dive into that and kind of counter some of the points that Roe brought, but Nick laid a solid foundation, again, for his other argument that would happen, but I just gave it to Roe. Round 2, though, I thought Roe had his best round ever because he said that, they lost in the conference finals. Spurs are the ones who get out of the second round. Kawhi was great, but much of that Spurs team was past their prime. He broke that down. He named names, ages. He also pointed out that in this case, the 67-win team that didn't make the finals was kind of a failure, but I thought that was a great point. Just, obviously none of these teams won the championship, but saying my team went further than yours, I think, is a valid point in this kind of a series. Obviously, the Kings went to the Western Conference Finals and took their opponent to 7 games, almost beat the defending champs. Nick kind of reiterated a lot of what he said from round 1, meaning, cheating doesn't matter, better coach. He started breaking down some of the roster better. San Antonio had 4 All-Stars or 4 Hall of Famers, presumptively. They beat the Kings in that regard. Kawhi was the best player on their team, obviously. Second to me, I did like how he said he was second to Steph Curry, who had maybe the best regular season of all time. That was a great point. And he finished second in the heat. Well, yeah. So he kind of on that. I just thought Rowe had in that team just had a lot of a little bit of rebuttals round one and outlined why some of the major points the Kings had. Round three though, I thought Nick was amazing in round three, which I was hoping he'd do a little bit more in round two. But he actually brought a lot of the numbers, how they were blowing them away offensively and defensively, or offensively they matched them. Defensively, it wasn't close. The best, defense in the league, it seemed in quite some time. Better net rating. Nothing the Kings were doing were numerically or, statistically were better than the Spurs. And then, Rowe just kind of reemphasized a little bit what he had said in round two and round one. Didn't really bring anything new, just two teams, but their overall roster. I was really hoping Rowe would kind of get into like their strengths of the teams, like their 3-point shooting, what they were doing against some of the better teams that year. But Nick really brought a lot of the things where I was hoping to see, and he brought it well. Just how hugely better that team was than the Kings in a lot of ways, and obviously he's not to the competition. But I thought it was very close. Round two or round one, it could have went either way, but I think I just barely to Rowe, but that third round was pretty gross.
All right, real fast before we get to Casual Hoops Heads take. If you are in the chat and you watch the debate, please just give your opinion through this poll on who you thought won. Smiley face will go to Rowe. Crying face will go to NMB. Just click it. I'm about to start the poll now. Casual Hoops Head, how did you see this debate going?
It was a great one, just like the last one. I'll try to keep my thoughts more condensed than the last time. But the first round, well, totally, I would give it to Rowe 2-1. The first round, I think, both came out pretty strong. Rowe was touching on, of course, how the series was potentially rigged, just controversial in general. Says how it forced certain rule changes to the shot clock and whatnot. And he pointed out just how the depth of the team and how he says everyone was at their peak, multiple players in MVP voting, and how they were coached by a former finals team. And he also pointed out certain injuries they were dealing with, like Peja, and yet they still took to the Lakers to 7 games. And, Nick, he was saying how the regular season should be more valued because both teams ultimately, came up short, which is a good point. And he points out, the pedigree of the Spurs, where they were a proven core, where the Kings were not a proven core championship-wise in the past. Says they had the better coach with Popovich, and says being robbed can be said for most teams, and that it's not really as relevant here as Rowe will make it seem or whatever. But I would give it the first one to Rowe, the first round. The second round, both did great as well. Rowe was talking about to the motive, how they was probably not wanting a Sacramento, New Jersey finals, which, could definitely be a motive there, and pointing out how the refs were admitting it. Tim Donaghy being brought up on charges and all that. And he points out how, the playoffs should matter to an extent. He says, the Spurs coming up short, missing the conference finals even, as a 67-win team. He says how that's a failure, and most would see it that way. And, he reiterates the injury issues and points out how the Spurs were more so riding on past glories, if you will, where Nick was, talking about how many All-Stars they had, they both had 2, and then how the Kings had less Hall of Famers than the Spurs. And he points out, Kawhi being second in MVP, to where the Kings didn't have any in second MVP. They were lower down the list. Both had a great second round, but I'd give that one to Rowe. And then the third one, I think Nick got that one, because Rowe was kind of reiterating a lot of the same points as in previous rounds. And I think Nick, when he started talking about a lot of the net rating, the SRS, a lot of the offensive rating, how they only averaged 1 less point than the Kings, who were more offensively acclaimed, while the Spurs also had the number 1 defense. I think that was great things to bring up, and says everyone was still efficient despite their age, which I think was a good rebuttal as well. So I would give the third round to Nick. But yeah, I got it 2-1 Row.
All right. For the poll, they 2 people voted. They voted saying that row 1, this doesn't count toward it. Herm, how did you think this went?
I think Rowe got it. I think the first 2 rounds for King Rowe, he got it. Nick obviously won that last round. King Rowe brought up some good points, whether people like it or not. That gambling thing do matter. Yes, they could have those free throws. I thought Nick would have counted it with those free throws in that game 6 and then that terrible ass game 7 that they did, that they had as well. So they blew opportunities despite of. But Rowe started out strong, and I think those first 2 rounds sealed it for him, in my opinion, though.
I gotta say before we get to the debaters, and this doesn't count. I wasn't a judge, but casually looking, not taking notes, I thought Nick won every round. But that's that again. I didn't take the notes. I didn't do all that. But I just want to put that just to put that out there, because Nick, you are on a generational losing streak with 3 losses. So I just wanted to say I thought you did well. And if I were a judge, again, I would have had to have taken the notes. But casually listening, I thought you did really well. Nick, how did you think you did?
Yeah, well, two of those losses, I put it on for the crowd. I did it for the fans. I took some hard positions there, but I gotta be honest, man. Like usually I don't complain too much, or it doesn't really matter. But I don't think this one is really that close. Like the Spurs were just head and shoulders, I think, a better team. Like I really have no other way to put it. They were more efficient. They were much better in the regular season. They have a better pedigree. They were more dominant almost all over the floor. I mean, top to bottom. So I just, I feel like, no offense to my opponent, but I don't really think he brought a whole lot of like stats or facts. He kind of just kept saying how they got robbed and that this was like the best iteration of that team, which again, I don't really think is a very good argument. And I went through how, even if you're going to say that this Kings team was in their prime or what have you, the Spurs team still has more players with more accolades and who did more and were more efficient, and ultimately led to a better performance as a team on both ends of the floor, and it's not even close. I usually don't complain, I know these are just for fun, but I have to admit that I don't think this one was very close. But I know I'm biased, and that's me, but I think the 2016 Spurs team is just, again, I'll say it again, is head and shoulders better. Maybe, that might be a little much for someone, but they are definitely better than this 0-2 Kings team, who has no track record really of being amazing winners and never getting out of the second round. And, I don't see how people would say, oh, well, that's the team that year that was so much superior, so much better, when the Spurs team had done it, year in and year out, up to that point. So, along with Kawhi Leonard being the best player on both sides of the ball.
And I think that's
yeah. I was going to say, Ro, if you could give your take.
Yeah, now look, shout out to you, Nick. You did bring more stats. I had some stats I left on the table, right? King, like the number one Kings being the number one pace team and that dead ball era team. Now I would have rebutted because you brought it in the last round and that was the advantage you had. I would rebuttal the Kings played in the dead ball era, so that scoring one more point in 2016 is a little bit a little bit of wasn't you stepped in it again when you said the Kings never got out of the second round when this particular Kings team lost in 7 in the conference finals. They were 1 game from the final. So I get what you mean, but that's what I harped on, and I think it was sort of a trap that was laid. It's like, okay, well, one thing I noticed about the Spurs team, because I just I wasn't sure if you were doing 16 or 17, and I figured you would do 17 because 16 because Tim Duncan was his last team, right? That was he retired right after that. You had the fact that they were old, right? The fact that yes, this was sort of I don't know, like the Temptations Like the Temptations pretty much doing a reunion tour or some shit like that. But no, it was a great team. The fact of the matter is, though, a 67 win team, and even you bringing up only 7 teams won more games. Well, I think that off the top of my head, there are only two. They're only one of two 67 or more win teams did not get to the conference finals. The other one being that 67 wins Dallas team, right? They got knocked out in the first round, unfortunately, by in 07, yeah. So 07, the Dirk MVP team. So that's almost a bit of a dubious thing because yes, I did bring up the fact that they were a great regular season team who just and I would have had I got another rebuttal round. You saying that they're one of the best teams I think did not win a championship. Well, you got to think of the team that beat them and had a 3-1 lead on the 72 3-win team, right? So OKC not only beat them but had a 3-1, lead on the 73-win team. It blew their own 3-1 lead. So this was 16 was a wacky year. I also would have brought up the fact that 16, like back in 02, you only have 12 players you can keep on the roster versus 15 guys you can keep on the roster in 16. That's why you see many more players on the roster. So the rule changes kind of help the Spurs in that way, being that you have an old team, you can deal with their injuries a little bit more. Back then you can only carry 12 guys. I mean, if somebody was hurt, maybe you can sign somebody to a 10-day. But yeah, you also erred by saying there's only one guy in the Naismith Hall of Fame. Vlade Divac is indeed in the Naismith Hall of Fame as well. So that is 2 for the Kings. Yes, you do have 4. But again, I think I did kind of harp on the fact that the only Naismith Hall of Famer in his prime was Kawhi Leonard. You at least have the Vlade Divac who still was, battling with big guy Shaq, battling with the bigs in the West. And you got Chris Webber, of course, who I think was prime at his peak, Chris Webber. And that's what I kind of lean over. Yeah, good job, Nick, because again, you did kick my ass on the stats.
I thought you did a good job. I just want to clarify. I maybe I'm mistaken, but Vlade Divac, I said they only had one Hall of Famer that largely got in because of his NBA career. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I think Vlade Divac largely got in for his international contributions as well. Am I wrong on that?
You can say that, but Vlade Divac spent 14 pretty good years in the NBA. Like I said, battling with the big men. So the fact of the matter is, right, when you bring up Hall of Famers, it's your point. It's not an NBA Hall of Fame. It's the Naismith Hall of Fame. And you even said it's the Naismith Hall of Fame. Therefore, Vlade Divac is indeed a second Naismith Hall of Famer on the Sacramento Kings.
But what I said was because of their NBA. I said because of their NBA career, there's really only one Hall of Famer. That's specifically what I said. And then the other thing, maybe you're misunderstanding me. I'm saying that outside of this year of the 02 Kings, they never got out of the second round. That's what I'm saying.
That's what I was going to
I don't think you said outside of this year, but again, I get the point, but I still feel it was a trap, being that we're comparing this team, and you brought up a lot of what you brought up them being in the dynasty. Well, okay, 14, you had 4 guys that was on that dynasty, right? But again, 3 of them are like fossils right now. The Kawhi was a baby on the 14, but he was the Finals MVP. He's the one guy in his prime. Everybody else, you can't say that. You're basically living on past glories. Well, I'm saying because we're comparing the team in that season. So 02, this is a team that was knocking on the door. And I did mention the fact that, they didn't go through that door because of, the things that happened, things that happened and the things that happened. That right there, those little facts illustrated that the 02 team was a little bit better than the 16 team, which again, I thought, if you look at it objectively, 67 wins and not getting to the conference finals at least, or you really expect a 6-7-win team to win to the finals. I know they had a 73-win team in the conference, but they lost to the team. They lost to another 60. I think OKC won a 60-win team, right? That's kind of crazy having 3 60-win teams in the same conference. But they lost to a team that they didn't get to the conference finals.
Hey, Dark, can we do Vlade versus Will Chamberlain?
Like I said, the funny thing about a Hall of Fame argument again is the Naismith Hall of Fame. Now, I get Vlade does some great things internationally, but he was damn sure solid NBA player. He was a guy that was traded for Kobe. He was a guy that, and honestly, I think he was kind of the defensive anchor. He was kind of, even though he's not like being credited for it, with an All NBA defensive.
Hey, Ro, hold on, Ro. Let me drop my Vladdy stat and get up out of here. How y'all doing, man? Great debate. I just want to drop my Vladdy fact for the day. A lot of people don't know. Vladdy Divac is one of 6 players with over 13,000 points, 9,000 rebounds, 3,000 assists, and 1,500 blocks, man. It's only 6 players to do that, man. We got to put just a little bit of respect on his name. Just a little bit.
I think Vladdy's top 5 all time.
There's some material for the Wilt Vlade debate.
He decent. I mean, the international career helped, but he had a decent NBA career.
Yeah, he did.
Vladdy, he was
just
decent.
didn't get in for his NBA alone. Is all I was
Yeah, I
saying.
know.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
Nick,
Vladdy was trash.
I thought a good counter was.
He was
Hold
good.
on.
But I don't
Nick,
even
thought a
remember
good
the 16 Spurs, though. Like, I don't even remember that squad.
Yeah,
The Goats?
hold on. That's the
I
other thing.
remember.
I don't remember. I just remember
Cavs.
Cavs, Warriors, and Thunder that year.
But Nick,
That was
not the year Kawhi Leonard got hurt, right?
73
That's
Yeah,
not
was that
the
the one
Zaza
where
No, that
he
was
stepped on Kawhi Leonard
2017.
or he stepped on someone's ankle or whatever?
That was the
That was
17 year,
Zaza
right?
year.
Yeah, when they had
Oh.
KD, yeah.
That was 17. That wasn't even, like, I don't even remember 16
Yeah,
Spurs.
the Zaza Pachulia was the next year. But hold on, I thought a good counter to even with you
No, that was
shitting
the
on
same
Big
year they won
Vlade.
73. That was the same year.
Oh, nice.
That wasn't the
Okay.
year. That wasn't the year that they. No, they had
Zaza
Durant. That was
Pachulia year
17.
was 17. Because remember, Kawhi doesn't play the rest of that series.
16. The Warriors beat the OKC.
Yeah.
Yes, but that was
So
the year
didn't
they
play-
had
didn't
73
play
wins.
those-
They didn't get 73
Yeah,
wins
yeah.
with Durant.
No, that's what I'm saying.
No, they had Durant when Kawhi Leonard got hurt. They didn't have 73. You're right.
Right. Yeah, so the
73
Zaza
was year
Pachulia
16.
year- Yeah, the Zaza Pachulia year will be 17. The one with Zaza Pachulia, and that's why we have another rule change, right? The landing area flagrant. So
Bruce
basically,
Bowen used to always do that.
Oh, yeah.
that was the Bruce
Bruce
Bowen
Bowen
special.
made a career out of that shit.
That was the Bruce Bowen special. Let's keep it real. That's what I'm saying. Like, mind you, see, here's the thing, right? How many of those ankle injuries did Pager get? Dealing with Bruce Bowen's dirty ass, right? But no, one counter that I did throw in there is that, say what you want about Vlade, he's down there wrestling with the big Aristotle, Shaquille O'Neal. You know what I'm saying?
He called him a big Aristotle.
You know what I mean? He's down there wrestling, so he kept that series close. He kept Shaq at bay just a little bit, just to get, So say what you want about Vlade. Vlade, again, I said he battled with big men for a long time in the NBA. So,
Man, nobody would even think to do this debate. That's a great debate. I ain't gonna lie.
hey, this is my concept, by the way, guys. Like I
Nobody
said,
would even think to pick no 16 Spurs and no 02. Maybe the 02 Kings, but nobody would pick 16 Spurs. So I got to give you credit for that. Like I said, I don't even remember that team. Like I said,
Absolutely, but yeah, thank
That's
you
good
guys.
shit.
I'm gonna end this live, but thanks Nick, thanks King Speech.
all right, Nick, good
if
Yeah,
anybody
bro,
want to
it's
debate
scheduled.
Vince Carter versus Paul George, or if anybody want to debate Chris Paul not a top 5 point guard, I'm ready. I am ready. Get that overrated
you hate
bum out
Chris
of here.
Paul.
Bob Cousy better than Chris Paul.
Switch, get
I
in the ring,
stand on
bro.
that. Bob Cousy
Well, I think
clears
so,
Chris
too.
Paul.
I agree with that.
Bob
I do
Cousy got an
agree with that.
MVP. Chris
Get ready,
Paul can
bro.
never get one.
All right, man.
Everyone, thank you for
Yes, sir.
coming up here. And Michael Jordan fans are the best.
Oh, Steph Curry overrated too.